Edwin Arnold's poem The Light of Asia describes Buddha being born as a wealthy prince. He was soon struck by the miseries of the world. Despite being raised in the lap of luxury, his heart could not tolerate the ideas of death, pain and suffering. How could the world be so cruel? What is the meaning behind this magnitude of misery? His material wealth could not make solace for this anguish within him, and so he renounced the world. He left behind his princess and his newborn son, wandering from teacher to teacher in the quest for truth, and how at last he attained enlightenment. At the time of his birth, his society was in need of a revolutionary spiritual leader, someone who could make heaven accessible to the common man once again. In his time, a powerful body of priests dominated society. They kept people blind to the meaning of life and instead diverted them towards arbitrary superstitions. Keep us happy and the gods will be happy. That was their motto. God is only attainable through them. You yourself cannot even dream of enlightenment, let alone pursue your own struggle for it. Throughout history, this so-called priestly propensity has been seen time and time again. The dreadful lust for power is somewhat innate within human nature. People climb to the top of the chain claiming to have access to the superior, whether that is money or God. Those with power promise salvation to the common class. Heaven is at your doorstep as long as you follow their rules. They twist simple truths into complicated paradigms. They feed you myths and legends that fit their narrative. The promise of a life after death, or perhaps just the American dream. The priests in Buddha's time were not much different to our own glamorized TV idols. Buy this cream and you'll attain immortality. Buy this car and you'll attain respect. The rituals are different in form now, but the promise is still the same. The promise that at the end of this grueling, complicated web of struggles, you will gain happiness. The less you understand, the better you feel. But at last, Buddha had enough. He cut through all the crap and he taught the simple truths of philosophy from the Vedas. Above all, he taught to everyone without discrimination. One of his greatest messages was of equality. Man, woman and child of any caste, creed and colour were equal in the pursuit of freedom. Each has the same right, and thus he gave the world 4 noble truths. There is suffering. There's a cause to our suffering. There's a way out of suffering. And at the end of suffering is in the 8-fold path. His basic doctrine was in finding that the root of all misery is our own selfishness. How do you climb out of this miserable cycle? His answer was to give up the self entirely. Or more clearly, the idea of the self. Because this self does not actually exist. There is no underlying soul or God. It is just a stream of thought. A flux of existence and non-existence, just as the body constantly changes, as does the sense of self. And so when we think of the I, it's just an illusion, in fact a delusion. As long as we cling on to this I, we can never find happiness, nor can we give any happiness. So this means that we must be able to give up everything we have for the smallest thing without flinching. Not because we want something in return or to please any god, but purely because for our own salvation, nirvana, it comes when you have killed your idea of the self. When you feel a connection with the tiniest of insects and the largest of galaxies, then only you can be free. When you see no distinction between you or anything else. And this is why Buddhism spread so fast. For history glutted in bloodshed, there was man preaching peace, tolerance and love. For all the wars that man had fought in the name of God, he had forgotten his own mankind. Buddha cared only for the path out of this misery for all. He went personally to spread his message to everyone that came across. His message had no fence, it was open to all. Politicians can't rid the world of its perpetual suffering. It can only be done through people themselves. His message was of oneness. The Buddha is not a person, he's a realization. And so we must work out our own salvation.